Zarifi, you wanted to add something to that?
Well, there's clear that there has to be peace negotiations, and peace negotiations are always with one's enemy. So, sure. But just a couple of points. In terms of costly signals, it's difficult to see what signal the insurgents could send that is clearer. They killed the president of Afghanistan's brother. They killed Rabbani, the head of the Peace Council. They could not be clearer that they are not in any way interested in any kind of peace talks. Across the border, we have seen, unfortunately, if you want to view it as a laboratory experiment, multiple instances where the Pakistani government announced these unilateral ceasefires, or in some cases bilateral ceasefires, without any talk of human rights, without any benchmarks, and immediately in each of those instances, with SWAT, of course, being the most famous instance, the insurgents simply said, great, we have no benchmarks, and your ceasefire is as good as our gun will shoot. So I think the answer to your question, the way forward is to put out the prospect of a peace, but with real benchmarks. But I would start with something else, absolutely, both in terms of the government-controlled areas of Afghanistan and in Pakistan. I would say let's give the insurgents and let's give the people who are in any way attracted to the insurgents a nice alternative. Let the Pakistan government get rid of the frontier crimes regulation. Let the Pashtun areas be developed. Let the government of Afghanistan be clean. Let's get rid of these corrupt warlords. Why is Rabbani, why was he even back? Sayyaf, Fahim, Ismail Khan, Dostum, these guys should have been cleaned out 10 years ago.
Yeah.
If the two sides in Afghanistan and in Pakistan can show what is possible, that a human rights friendly developing alternative is possible, many of the people who are sucked into the insurgencies will have an actual alternative. And I think that's what will weaken this incredible cycle of violence.
All right, we're going to, I know both of you want to comment, but it's time for me to take a break. So I'm going to take a quick break, but this is a crucial point Mr. Zarifi has raised over here. I know where I stand. I sort of pretty much agree with what he's saying, but I want to know what my guests are going to say right after this short break. And welcome back to Witness. Before the break, Mr. Sam Zarifi from London made a strong argument, at least I think so, that there's an alternative to fighting and there's an alternative to negotiation. I buy that argument, Dr. Riffat, but both of you here in the studio both have a pretty volatile reaction to that. Dr. Riffat, what's your argument?
Well, my essential point is that we had 10 years of brutal use of force by both sides, and the result is now a strategic stalemate. No side seems to be in a winning position. Once we know this as a fact, then the question is that where do we go from there? And what I was trying to recommend was, when I suggested a ceasefire, I was suggesting essentially a non-killing approach to peace building, which will benefit the not only the warring parties but also the people who actually are suffering, which are the people of Afghanistan. People of Afghanistan
and Pakistan. You see, this is the point I want to make. Yeah, you want to say something?
In addition to this, now we have these allegations that Rabbani was killed by the insurgents. I am not sure that we actually have incontrovertible evidence of Mr. Rabbani being killed by the Afghan insurgents. They may have killed him, they may not have killed him.
The Afghan government is blaming it on Pakistan.
No, of course, if you want to get into the blame game, they will blame us 10 times, we will blame them 15 times, and that will not produce a result. Why can't there be a joint investigation of the circumstances which led to this guy's murder? Right. So I think what I'm trying to suggest is that by adopting a non-killing approach to peace building, you will actually create space for the real negotiations to take place. Otherwise, if you believe that we are going to use the drone attacks and we are going to weaken them, and then so bad that they will come to the negotiating table, it's not going to work. It is not going to work.
The logic of war continues to amaze me.
You're a former military man.
Amnesty International should be the last organization ever proposing or suggesting that the war needs to continue or the killing needs to continue. I think killing is.
I don't think killing. Let him correct that.
Remotely what I suggested.
Right.
Remotely what I suggested.
All right. Let me move on. So what I'm suggesting is that killing is not going to get anybody anywhere. We have done that for the last 10 years. About 70,000 people, 80,000 people in both countries have died till now, and so many more have actually suffered in terms of casualties, other casualties, etc.
And there is no end to it.
And we haven't reached anywhere in terms of. So therefore, whenever you want to get into diplomacy, there's got to be some space, as Dr. Riffat earlier mentioned. You've got to create some space. Now, who and how that space is going to be created?
That's where I want.
You know?
Yeah,
so,
that's
so
what I want.
space and then space for what? The point here is that there is idealism in terms of the higher mantle of standards that the international community looks at in terms of Afghanistan. Unfortunately, Afghanistan may have a different set of how they want to function as a political entity, which you, I, or Dr. Riffat, or even Mr. Zarifi could not impose onto Afghans. And similarly, strangely for perhaps Mr. Zarifi, the frontier people, where the FCR is imposed, are the ones who will actually be most reluctant to change it, and which
the
is
warlord. I'm sorry, the tribal chiefs support the FCR. The people don't.
Unfortunately, we have not had a system of whereby we can go and carry out a referendum and get the opinion of everybody. Now you got to be able to do that, and therefore the government in the recent months or recent weeks has already actually imposed or said FCR is to be taken out, and therefore there's political parties act has been imposed there. Political parties can begin to function there, etc., etc. Now all that is very good, and it will come with peace. Unfortunately, when the war is on, you really, I mean, you cannot, as a journalist, cannot go into that area without permission, without escort, without.
The last time I went was 10 years ago.
So what I'm saying is, when you have war imposed on you, the way it is being fought in Afghanistan, the way it is going on in Pakistani regions, unfortunately, you have little option. So you got to create space, give space to the governments, give space to the people. Killing your way out. Killing your way out is a possibility.
Is a possibility.
Is a possibility for the United States.
For the Americans, yeah.
For the Americans, but not for us.
Not for us.
We've got to live here. We've got to live with Afghanistan. Afghans have got to live with us.
Now, here's my, maybe idealism reigns supreme for me always, but I've always believed that, the cost of a drone, a single drone, could pay for a state-of-the-art hospital in one of the tribal agencies. 8 drones. Instead of those, put in 8 state-of-the-art hospitals in the 8 tribal areas. But nobody, Dr. Riffat, nobody wants to put money into things that would actually perhaps wean people away from supporting militancy.
Well, the reason
Listen, I mean, look at that again, just to be fair, just compare the Pakistani government annual budget. In terms of the annual budget put into healthcare and education, versus the budget put into the military. I mean, Pakistan has per capita one of the lowest educational expenditures. I mean, that's of course absurd, because
it is health and education.
It is absurd being looked at from London.
Okay, one by one.
It is absurd looked at from London or Washington. But in Pakistan, you have a 14% of the budget and 3.5% of your GDP going to military. If you have a 10-year-old war that you are in, and you have a 97% war economy in Afghanistan, what else do you expect? I mean, if the war was to finish, for example, in Afghanistan today, they will not have an economy. 97% of the economy in Afghanistan is being fed by war economy. It's a war economy.
Exactly.
So you'll not have a war. You'll not have an economy. What are you talking about? Now those are the fruits of last 10 years.
War economy means. I mean, that's just absolutely untrue. I mean, that's just
97% of the monies coming into Afghanistan are
around the international community as aid. Now, to compare that in post-conflict situations per capita, East Timor, Cambodia, Bosnia, Kosovo, in fact, that 97% is per capita at most a quarter of the international assistance that was given to those other economies. So while we talk about the international community putting in a lot, in fact, per capita, they have significantly under-resourced Afghanistan. But most of that is not, I mean, the war economy, the war budget is one thing, but at this point, the international aid is, and what has been keeping the Afghan people able to access even modest educational and healthcare advances. But the point is to look at the alternative that we're providing to
briefly, Mrs. Zarifi, because I'm running out of time. Yeah, Dr. Riffat, last words.
Well, I think what I would suggest is that unless and until you bring this, this totally devastating fighting to a closure, you will not be able to have any kind of meaningful
Absolutely.
peace. You can engage in talks, you can talk about peace, but the peace will not return. And peace must return because the region cannot afford the cost of this war.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. I'm out of time because otherwise this debate has been amazing. Thank you so much for joining me. Dr. Riffat Hussain, Air Vice Marshal retired Shahzad Chaudhry, and from London, Mr. Zarifi of Amnesty International. Thank you so much for having joined me in today's program. And ladies and gentlemen, I leave you with a thought that has always intrigued me all through the time that I've been studying politics and international affairs, the justice of war and the justice in war. And now I have to add to that justice after war. Justice after war is something that we have to prepare for. It's not just going to descend on us. It is something that we have to think about. The military will always have a military mindset. They will do what they think is right. It is now up to the politicians of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and indeed the global community to understand that the peace dividend, if not delivered to Pakistan and Afghanistan, will simply perpetuate an already very long and expensive war. Quatrina saying Khuda Hafiz from Islamabad.